Hello there, everybody. Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. Um, is my audio even working? I gotta check that. Hold on one sec. Let me take a look and see if my audio is working, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, this thing is always a little bit difficult. If I end up having to restart this, then my apologies. But anyways, how do I tell that I'm live on this thing? Says that I'm live, but I cannot hear my audio. Hold on one sec. Um, Boy, it would really help out if this thing would be easier. Okay, hold on one sec, ladies and gentlemen, and then we're gonna have a conversation. Let me try this. Let's see. Okay. All right. If you guys can hear me, let me know. I actually cannot tell. So, for whatever reason, like it's just not doing it. Hmm. Okay. What is the problem with this damn audio? Huh. Okay. Yeah, like it's acting like it doesn't even hear me at all. Okay, awesome. All right, so you can hear me. All right, thanks, man. All right, so that's good. For whatever reason, it's not coming up on my audio, and I'm trying to see how I hear in the video, but it's like it's not letting me see it live. I'm gonna check the audio really quickly, and then we'll kind of get into this and get into this conversation. Um, I had a live, I believe, a couple of days ago, and the conversation was mainly about Canelo and Terrence Bud Crawford. So that was a pretty good live stream. I decided to do another one. I thought the next one was actually going to be over Vasily Lomachenko, but I decided to do it on this because there was actually a few comments about Oleksandr Usyk, and this has been a conversation actually now for a while. So yeah, I just wanted to do that. All right, but before I do this. Let me check a couple of things. All right, why is this not? Uh, let's see. Edit. Okay, cool. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. It is being really weird on me right now. Hold on one sec. Got to make a couple of edits, and then we'll all be good. All right. Okay. So I think it should be good. It's not really letting me know, but either way, one of you guys said that you can hear me, so that's good enough. So this conversation is going to be over Alexander Usyk, and Usyk, of course, has he's made quite a mark recently within that of the boxing world. The question is about Alexander Usyk is does he deserve to be within that of the all-time great conversation? And of course, I put some other fighters within this picture, as you can see: Muhammad Ali, Lennox Lewis, Evander Holyfield, Mike Tyson, certain heavyweights, of course, that would be regarded as all-time great level heavyweight fighters or fighters that would be known as legendary fighters. The question is Usyk on the same level as those guys? And I've always debated that he is, and I've always debated that he definitely is someone that can be remembered and is within the all-time great level conversation. But you have a lot of people, of course, that would kind of disagree with that. But we're going to talk about a couple of comments that was on my former video, actually on the Canelo Crawford situation, and I thought that they were kind of interesting, so I wanted to talk about this. But okay, so let's get to some of the comments here. Let's see in my latest video. So, of course, for those of you that don't know the accomplishments of Usyk, Usyk is someone that is a time undisputed champion in two separate weight divisions. He was in the cruiserweight division and also within that of the heavyweight division. Now, once again, the question is he someone on the level of Ali or some of these other guys? Hold on one sec. And the question is he someone on the level of Okay. All right, so let me take a look at this thing right here. So the main comment that I actually wanted to respond to, I believe that his name was Operator 79. Um, so this is an interesting one. He said in the last stream, he said There were a lot of great points made on this live. I just want to add that Usyk's resume is not nearly as impressive as his fans want you to believe, and here are the objective facts. Number one, Usyk fought as high as super heavyweight in the amateurs as far back as 2012, yet he played it safe in the pros, fighting lighter guys at cruiser for the bulk of his career, where he was visibly larger than his opponents in terms of muscle density. Well, let me first of all respond to this one. Just because a fighter ends up fighting within that of the amateurs at a certain weight doesn't always necessarily mean that they're going to fight at that weight for their whole entire career. We've seen this with Vasyl Lomachenko. Lomachenko, I believe, fought at 135 actually for a great amount of his amateur career or for the Olympics. But once he got to professional boxing, he wasn't a natural 135 pounder. So the argument that Usyk was a guy that was, I'm not going to say a lot bigger, but bigger than a lot of the guys at cruiserweight. I mean, when you do take a look at some of his fights, he definitely seems a little bit bigger in terms of height, maybe even a little bit of muscle density. But he's someone that he wasn't really what I would classify as a quote unquote weight bully. Usyk was still around the same size as those guys. I believe like the biggest he ever was at that weight class was maybe 10 pounds over the weight limit. And keep in mind that Usyk is someone that at his heaviest rehydrated at 230 pounds, and that was at his absolute max weight. And that was for, I believe, either the first fight or the rematch against Tyson Fury. So Usyk is not this person that really is this natural heavyweight. He is really more of a cruiserweight. So anyway, so this is okay. So this is another point that I really wanted to address because I've seen so many people really make this point. So he says the guy has less than 2 dozen professional fights on his record, and it would be crazy to put him on any kind of all-time great heavyweight list over guys who have 50 plus fights. It's not really that hard to look great over the course of 20 fights. The true sign of greatness comes from consistency, improving yourself over 40, 50, or 60 fights, taking on dozens upon dozens of different opponents. Well, you can make that argument if you want to, but this has actually been something that many people have debated, and not just for Usyk, but many fighters for a while. Um, when you take a look at a lot of the fighters from the 60s and 70s or 50s or certain things like that, they'll have fights on there to where there'll be 70, 80, 90 professional fights. And a lot of the opponents on there, they're not super high quality. So the question would be is that when we take a look at, say, Muhammad Ali's record, who are about the top six fighters that he ended up defeating in his career? Because he had 50 something fights, but the 50 fights that he had, they weren't all against elite level competition. Of course, we know that, Muhammad Ali beat Joe Frazier, Sonny Liston, George Foreman, certain other guys like that. But was he ever a guy that, really ever, just fought repeated all time great after all time great? No, that's a myth. So this narrative of, and this is also the similar thing with Lomachenko when he was also looked at as a number one pound for pound. You had so many of these guys that were saying, well, why is Lomachenko number one pound for pound? He only has 11 fights. It's more about the quality of opposition than what it is the amount of fights. And when you take a look at Oleksandr Usyk, you're talking about several different champions. At the cruiserweight, you're talking about Maris Bradis. You're talking about, I'm trying to think who else he fought there. Michael Hunter wouldn't have been a champion, but he would have been a very decent undefeated American fighter who eventually got big wins at the heavyweight division, including over Martin Bakole, and also got a draw over Alexander Povetkin. You're also talking about a win, Marco Huck, maybe not an A grade level fighter, but Glowacki, I believe, was. You have a couple of other fighters that I'm kind of drawing a blank to right now. Murat Gassiev. Those fighters, in my view, are all A grade level fighters, at least debatably. Keep in mind that all those fighters were undefeated when Oleksandr Usyk fought them. He fought a lot of undefeated guys. Now, as for Tony Bellew and Marco Huck, I don't know 100% if I would debate them as A grade. I mean, you could debate it if you wanted to. That being stated, I do believe that Usyk even had a better performance over Marco Huck than most people in his career, even including Alexander Povetkin, I believe. So this argument that you have to have 50 plus fights, I mean, if I just look up Muhammad Ali's box rec right now, if I look up, his record, and we take a look at the 50 fights in his career, I guarantee you a lot of those guys, once again, they're not going to be super high quality. So let's take a look at Muhammad Ali, for example. Let's take a look at his box rec. I'm going to look it up right now. Hold on one sec. So we're going to take a look overall at his box rec real quick. And when you take a look at some of these opponents, I mean, you're talking about Ernie Shavers, who was a very good fighter. I don't know how great of a fighter he actually was, but when he fought him, he was 54-5. Richard Dunn, a guy who was 33-9. Jimmy Young, 17-4. John Pierre Koopman, 24-3. Joe Bugner, 51-6. And a couple of these other guys, Chuck Wepner, 31-9. So I mean, the point being is that you take a look at Ali, and I believe that the thing is that he has like 56 wins, but how many of these guys were super high quality? I see Fight Sports Talk right there. Nice to see you there again, man. I'll have you in the conversation here in 1 minute. Actually, I'm gonna put down the link real quick. And Fight Sports, can you let me know if you can hear me clearly, because it someone said that they heard me clearly a bit earlier, but yeah. I can't tell. This thing is just not doing well for me right now. But Fight Sport Talk says, for me, Usyk is the greatest of this era, greatest cruiserweight, top 10 all time great heavyweight, and greatest for undisputed champ ever. That's an interesting point. I think that Usyk definitely debatably is the greatest of this era, the greatest cruiserweight. I think you would definitely have to debate it. I mean, of course, the greatest cruiserweight before this was Evander Holyfield, but Usyk has surpassed even what Holyfield was able to do. So that's something overall to where I think Usyk, he definitely deserves a lot of credit. You're talking about someone that was completely undisputed in that weight class, and then went up to heavyweight and beat two of the best heavyweights there. That's never really been done before. So I mean, that's something that is super duper phenomenal. But anyways, hold on one sec. Let me check something, and then I'll be right back on this. Hold on one sec. Okay. Um. All right. Habman rates Usyk as the best cruiserweight ever. Habman, in my view, is one of the better channels out there. In my personal view, he's a pretty unbiased channel in my view. Not saying that I agree with everything that the man states, but in my view, he's definitely one of the better channels out there. I've always liked Hatman. But let's see. Hold on one sec, ladies and gentlemen. God, this thing is just acting so weird on me today. Sorry. Um, okay. Okay. But anyways, yeah, no, I agree. I think that he is hands down the greatest cruiserweight of all time. And like I stated, when we're taking a look at Ali's record, like I stated, when we take a look at it, you have these guys overall that'll claim, well, it's super disrespectful. That people mention Usyk along guys like Ali and Tyson and some of these other guys. I mean, when we take a look at these fighters right here on the screen, Tyson, Ali, Lewis, and Evander Holyfield, there's this myth that always goes around that you have these guys that that they're older fighters, and that the fighters of today just don't even compare. And I don't agree with that. When you talk about, once again, Evander Holyfield, it's not like he never lost a fight. He ended up losing certain fights, or he ended up having very troubling times against opponents that really wouldn't be looked at as super duper elite. He also ended up losing fights to where fighters would be looked at as similar in size. I believe Michael Moore, he damn near lost to Burt Cooper, someone that was pretty much a journeyman. And like I stated, once again, this narrative of Ali just fighting these guys that, always were top of the game, that's not true. Because when we take a look at some of these opponents, 35-11, 44-27, 24-7, 19-3, 21-3, 27-8, 33-11, 34-11, 35-13, like Brian London, and some of these other guys. So this narrative, once again, that all these fighters, and I'll let Fight Sport Talk join the debate here in one sec. This narrative that all these fighters just of the past age, that they just have these way better wins or always fought competition that was more on elite level, is it's just a narrative. But anyways, all right. So I have Fight Sport Talk here. But yeah, man, glad to have you back on the channel. I'm sure that you're someone excited to talk about the Usyk conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me, brother. Won't be able to stay as long as I did yesterday, but yeah, I'm always happy to talk about Usyk. I'm a huge fan of him, but a realistic fan, and yeah, I always there's so many reasons why I like talking about him.
Yeah. Yeah, he's I think he's phenomenal. I think so. The reason why I talk about this is because not only have I reviewed so many channels that always try to debate about what an all-time great level fighter is, but what you have to do. One of the things that I always see, like I remember when I reviewed a video by Aki TV. Now, me and you, of course, already kind of talked about. We think that he's a charlatan, and I agree. But one of the things that Aki TV was stating is that how can we put Usyk on an all-time great level when we think even Evander Holyfield would have destroyed him? And that to me is something that, first of all, it's not only completely hypothetical, but this narrative that some of the heavyweights of old were just way better than Usyk or some of the cruiserweights are way better. I think it's just a complete fallacy. When you talk about Evander Holyfield, he was someone that, if we're actually going to compare side by side, I don't think he was as all around talented as Usyk. It's not that he could have probably not fared well, but this thing of these all-time greats just, that Usyk can't compare to them, it doesn't make any sense. When you take a look at any of these fighters right here, they all suffered losses and they all had their setbacks. Lennox Lewis ended up getting knocked out against two opponents that he was never supposed to lose to in the first place. Evander Holyfield lost a couple of fights that maybe certain people wouldn't claim that he probably should have lost. Of course, he lost to Riddick Bowe. Usyk was actually able to defeat some of the bigger and heavier opponents of his career that were looked at as very deeply A grade at the time. Ali also, although a great fighter, not invincible. And I'm not claiming that Usyk is necessarily for sure above a lot of these fighters, but to claim that he's just nowhere near on the same level, to me, would be something that it is just not provable. All these fighters have suffered losses, and yeah, so that's basically been my point overall about this. But but Usyk, the fact that he's been undefeated, two completely undisputed, champion in two separate weight classes, and probably had the toughest run out of any of those fighters that win undisputed in two weight classes. I think the man is an all-time great. I think he's debatably up there with a lot of the cruiserweights and heavyweights that I've ever seen, in all honesty. But yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a lot not to talk about there, but first on Aki's channel, I mean, that was one of the videos where I explained just how off his statement. I wouldn't even say it was an opinion, because as I've said, this guy Aki is a charlatan because he doesn't actually say anything authentic. It's
Yeah.
all just a pre-rehearsed script, and it's terrible because the guy doesn't even put himself on camera, and you can tell he's reading a script.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's one of the videos where I said I'll debate him in a heartbeat, but I doubt he's never responded. So whatever. Yeah, in terms of just put into context how great I think Usyk is, and the only video I've done on this was after the second Fury fight. I did do a video. I was going to talk about his overall legacy, where this puts him in the heavyweight discussion, but because he didn't retire, I held that back. I'm going to wait for him to call it a day.
Yeah.
But in terms of his cruiserweight, where he ranks as the greatest cruiserweight ever, because for me, he's clearly above Holyfield. I mean,
Yeah.
just to everybody listening, if you actually look at the quality of competition, it's not even close. Like
Yeah.
Holyfield beat some great fighters, not disrespecting Dwight Muhammad Qawi, but Usyk clearly beat better fighters.
Yeah.
And we talked about this yesterday on your show, that Usyk's cruiserweight undisputed run is better than anybody in this era, better than Crawford's, better than Inoue's, better than Canelo at super middleweight. So after the Fury fight, I compared him to all of the other great cruiserweights. Compared him to David Haye, Jean-Marc Mormec, Holyfield. There was somebody else in there. I think I compared him. I basically compared him to everybody who is in the conversation. And again, Usyk's run is clearly better. So people can check that video out. In terms of heavyweight, it's an interesting one because in terms of a long successful run at the top, Usyk hasn't actually been there for very long.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have the quantity of wins. Now, quality, it's as high quality as you can get in this era. Joshua twice, Holyfield, Fury twice, Dubois about to be twice, and Chisora was always a top contender, always a decent contender, not a top contender, but a good fringe contender. So therefore, I'm waiting for him to retire before I do this in detail, but therefore he is clearly, in my opinion, top 10.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as how high on the top 10, for me, it's very difficult to put him top 5 because, again, the amount of wins just aren't there.
Yeah.
But in terms of his legacy as an all-time great, and as I said in the comments, a great fighter in the four-bout era, I think aside from Bernard Hopkins, and I've gone through all these guys in detail, but it's going to be quite a difficult video to put together. I think in terms of all the guys who have been undisputed champs in the four-bout era, so this is going back to Jermaine Taylor and Bernard Hopkins, I think Usyk has the best resume of all of them, aside from maybe Hopkins. That one's a little questionable to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is just me trying to explain where I rank him as an all-time fighter. In terms of how he would match up to heavyweights, I mean, there's a difference between saying somebody's resume is better than fighter A has a better resume than fighter B, and fighter A would beat fighter B. That's a different thing.
Yeah.
I do think, for example, Usyk would, if he were to fight prime Mike Tyson and prime, if we took the prime Usyk who ran circles around Joshua in the first fight, who was like 34, and put him against prime Lennox Lewis, who beat Ray Mercer, and Mike Tyson, who was undisputed champ, I think they would both beat him because styles make fights. But, and this is probably going to piss a lot of people off, but hear me out, I think Usyk has a better heavyweight resume, arguably, than Mike Tyson.
I think Lewis as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we agree because that's kind of a blasphemy thing. You say Usyk has a greater resume than Mike Tyson, but I'll just if people compare Tony Tucker to Tyson Fury, there's really no comparison.
Exactly. I'll interrupt you one moment here because this person, amateur boxer 45-0, wants to join the stage. I'll let him join. I'll also let you finish your points real quick, but I'm guessing he wants something to say, so I'll add him. But yeah, sure, continue.
Yeah, sure. So, and the other thing I'll say is, look, Michael Spinks was a fantastic fighter, all-time great, no doubt. But Anthony Joshua was a more formidable challenge because of the size. Michael Spinks was a small heavyweight who, I mean, people just need to look. People need to compare Michael Spinks at light heavyweight to the guy who beat Larry Holmes. Great fighter, but he could barely move at the heavyweight. It was crazy how much he slowed down. So yeah, I think because of styles, guys like Lewis, guys like Mike Tyson would have probably beaten Usyk. But I also think Usyk would have clearly beaten Holyfield. I mean, it wouldn't have been close. Just style-wise, it wouldn't have been close. Holyfield was great. Holyfield was great. And I will say this, his heavyweight run is better than Usyk's because he's been there longer. But it's not that far off. I mean, the size difference between Usyk and Fury is miles bigger than Holyfield against Bo. Like, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. Let me talk about Mike Tyson very quickly because I always state this, and not just about boxing, but everything in life, but sports especially. Narrative oftentimes travels a lot more than what the actual reality is. And when you talk about Mike Tyson, there are certain figures in sports that their image is bigger than what the actual results were. Mike Tyson is one of those guys. Mike Tyson was a guy to where he was so phenomenally talented. And of course, because of the many knockouts and entertainment that he put on, so many people put him in these all-time great conversations. I got to be honest, if we're really going there, it's really even a debate in my personal view if Mike Tyson really should even be counted as an all-time great level fighter. When we take a look at the 5 best wins, say, of all these guys' career, just Holyfield, Lewis, Usyk, Ali, and Tyson, because those are the guys on the screen. When we take a look at Ali, we can talk about Liston. We can talk about even Floyd Patterson if you want, although he probably really didn't belong at heavyweight at that time. But let's just not even count him. So let's say Sonny Liston, George Foreman, Joe Frazier, Ken Norton, and someone else that you want to include, Lennox Lewis. You have Evander Holyfield. You also have, a few other contenders on there that would be very good. I think he also defeated Andrew Galata. When we take a look at Mike Tyson, the 5 best wins of his career, you have Larry Holmes And Larry, of course, was an all-time great fighter when he was during his peak years. But keep in mind, Larry had already suffered 2 losses at this time to like a cruiserweight Michael Spinks, and he came off like a 2-year layoff and was coming off of 2 losses, I believe, to Michael Spinks, and he was 40. So that probably, to be quite honest with you, that and the Michael Spinks win is probably Mike Tyson's biggest wins. That's really about it. Every other win after that, you're talking about Donovan Ruddock. You're talking about, I mean, Buster Mathis. I don't even know who else would really qualify as a great win. Frank Bruno, I guess, but was Frank Bruno really someone that was a great heavyweight? He was someone that won a title at one point, but pretty much every big fight in his career he ended up losing. Mike Tyson is someone that, like I stated, the image of him is a lot bigger than his actual resume. He doesn't really have an all-time great resume. A lot of the bigger fights that he was in, he didn't just lose. He basically got stopped very thoroughly. And that's why I don't think Mike Tyson and Usyk, if you would have talked about them fighting individually, honestly, I would have bet on Usyk because Tyson just got overwhelmed by certain fighters that not only were great fighters, but could possibly be a little bit bigger than him as well. He just did. Every time Mike Tyson really stepped up in class, he ended up losing. But by the way, amateur boxer, I see you. I'm gonna add you to the stage, but I'll make a couple more points. For whatever reason, this mic is muted. Anyways, so but the point being is that when you have these arguments that none of these fighters like Usyk just can compare to them, it just doesn't make any sense. Lewis once again, and he's probably Ali and Lewis, I think, are the greatest fighters on the screen other than Usyk. But all these guys had their losses. Evander Holyfield, and I agree with you. I think Holyfield would have lost to Usyk. And it's not that he wasn't a great fighter, but Holyfield was not this guy that was a spotless skilled fighter. He got knocked down several times in his career, even before, the big fights with Mike Tyson. Now, he didn't get knocked down in those fights, but Holyfield was a guy that at times would get hit a little bit too much. He would suffer losses. Lennox Lewis was a guy that got knocked out by 2 guys that were never, ever really supposed to touch belts in the first place. Ali, although a great fighter, he does have certain holes in his game as well. He doesn't defend a left hook very well. He keeps his hands down extremely low at certain times. So I always wanted to state that because what the narrative is from a lot of these guys is how can we compare Usyk? He doesn't have 50 plus fights. He doesn't, overall, how can you compare him? He's nowhere near as great as Ali, but is that the actual case? Because you have many of these people that always want to claim overall that, these guys are way greater, but they're not undefeated. They're not people overall that don't have X's in their career. They have losses. Keep in mind that Ali, although he was a bit older, he did lose to someone that was 8-0. He is someone that lost to Joe Frazier. He is someone overall that lost to Ken Norton and had 3 tough battles against Ken Norton. And I also wanted to state this because I see this with Canelo Alvarez a lot. And, you've stated that you've seen Dante's Box Nation and a lot of that stuff. What Dante will try to use with Canelo, and this narrative to me makes no sense because you would have to discredit so many all-time great level fighters. He says, well, we can't really count the wins over Lara or Golovkin because, he debatably lost those fights. Now,
Oh boy.
yeah, exactly. Those are fights that, in my view, could have went either way. But this is the problem. If we're going to use those standards, we would have to discredit so many fighters within the history of boxing. When we talk about Manny Pacquiao, like in his fights against Marquez, a lot of people thought that he could have potentially lost those fights. Does that mean we just don't count those wins? Do we not count Andre Ward's win over Sergey Kovalev? Do we not count Sugar Ray Leonard and his win over Hagler because many people thought that he lost that fight? So the point is, we can't just do this stuff. We have to have similar standards for everybody, and that's why yeah.
If I could just say, sorry, bro. If I could just say this, like I'm very impressed that you spend as much time as you do critiquing Dante and Aki because again, Aki's just a charlatan. Dante, I believe he actually does believe in what he says, and I said he's very impressive the way he has double standards, and he makes you think that, or he tries to make you think he's objective when he's everything but.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just his double standards are so blatantly obvious. I mean, this is why I stopped listening to the guy. I mean, I thought he knew his boxing at least when I first subscribed to his channel, but I thought, God, these double standards, they do my head in. So
yeah.
What he says makes no sense because again, if he actually, I'm hoping he'll have me on to debate him because if you actually say this to his face, look, you say this about your favorite fighters, but then you say the opposite about fighters you're critical of, and you don't take the nuance into equation at all, half of his arguments fall apart.
Exactly. Yeah. I'll claim this before you even continue talking. There's a reason why I like to review Dante and Aki TV so much to a certain degree, because the reason why they have such a big following, they really love to target, and their target audience is basically a lot of the minority communities, especially within that of America, that believe that they're marginalized or believe that they're being kind of, obviously victims of racism, which of course a lot of them, obviously are. But that's why it's so easy for Dante to connect with a lot of those guys. I review so many videos by Dante and these guys because they target so many of those guys specifically, and they lead them in a direction basically to where it's like, well, Usyk is really only number one pound for pound because he's a Caucasian fighter, and this is a racialized thing, and many people follow it because either they're way too emotional or they feel marginalized themselves and they can relate to it. So Dante and Aki TV, they play off the heartstrings of so many people, but those people don't really realize a lot of the times that they're pretty much being played, or they don't know the whole story. So that's why I've reviewed so many videos by Dante, because many people don't realize when the whole story is not in motion. Because if you were to just listen to him, you would think that Usyk is just this guy, or in a way, or some of these other guys have been debated number one because they're non-black fighters, and that's not the case. It would be different if it's someone, say, like I don't know, I don't even know who to compare right now, but say it would be different if Usyk didn't accomplish the things that he did at heavyweight. It'd be a bit different. But that's why I always like to claim that, because his narratives, I think, do a lot of damage, not just to certain boxers, but they do a lot of damage to certain people that are incoming in that of the boxing circle. And that's why I like to review so many of his videos, because he really targets a lot of suckers that kind of come new into the sport. And it's easy for him because he knows how to play on their heartstrings and he knows how to relate to them. So a lot of my videos are not even just based on double standards. They're also to help people realize that this is not the reason why he's ranked number one pound for pound. There's a difference between an example of a fighter that's ranked number one pound for pound because of their race mainly, and someone that actually deserves to be there, even if the racial component is a part of it. So that's the reason why I've critiqued him so much. I've critiqued Aki, Boxing Ego, Dante. Now, there are some people in the LDBC that I do think actually, even if they are a bit more racialized, I think that they bring up a lot of good points. Boxing Ego is someone that he definitely has some racial motivations, but I think he's a relatively intelligent analyzer. Blue Blood Sports TV to a degree as well. Bruce M.F. Vane, a bit too much for my liking, but he's someone that also can bring up some good points. But Dante and Aki TV, they're just very blatant, very just play on the heartstrings of a lot of minority boxing fans, which is just highly unfortunate, because I think he's just really, honestly, just kind of putting false things out there, and many people bite it up because on the surface it sounds realistic, but if you do any research, especially about the boxing game, you know how to discredit it immediately. But unfortunately, most people just don't do that research. So that's why I've done so many videos on that. But yeah, that's the reason why.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll compare Archie to a conspiratard who,
Yeah.
you hear one you hear one thing about the official narrative of I'm trying to how do I keep this explicit but at least make it clear what I'm saying, because I don't want to bring politics into this, but
Yeah.
but you hear, let's say you knew that something mysteriously escaped from a lab instead of a market. I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. But then you take that and you think, well, 5G towers will spit out fire, fire at us in our sleeps, and
Yeah.
they're going to take us out. Again, I'm trying to keep this as explicit as possible, but
Yeah.
in other words, you find out that we were told a lie, and then you think, well, everything's a lie.
Yeah.
Not the case. I mean, that's just very low.
Exactly.
That's just extremely low IQ.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
there is something. I've actually become known on Twitter as a defender of a certain country. But again, I'm not going to go into that.
Yeah.
But it's because people so many people, intelligent people, are believing blatant lies because we've been told so many lies. So
Yep.
Aki, again, the guy's just not intelligent. But he only got to where he is because, again, he rides off Dante's coattails. Now, I will just say one thing: these guys, they're actually not part of the LDBC. And I know this because I've actually had conversations with some of them.
Yeah.
Some of the LDBC, the guys who I've spoken to, they've actually been very, very respectful to me. So I've got respect for them. We don't agree, but they've never called me biased. So, I guess the one thing I'll say is there's definitely credence that, again, there is, of course, there's bias, there's racial bias in every aspect of life, but it's not one-sided. This is what,
yeah, exactly.
If you do believe it's one-sided, then you either don't know what you're talking about or you're being dishonest.
Agreed.
Because again, the guy who Floyd Mayweather was comparing himself to Ray Robinson a couple of years before he fought Oscar De La Hoya. And I mean, you want to talk about premature people being premature. That's an example. And he hadn't even moved weight classes yet. He beat Diego Corrales, and the HBO team, who were always critical of him, compared him to Ray Robinson and Willie Pep.
Yeah.
And people talk about the hype that Lomachenko received, which again was very big. And he, again, if we're being objective, he didn't quite live up to the hype. But regardless, Devin Haney, again, he was compared to Floyd Mayweather when he hadn't even fought for a world title yet.
Yeah, exactly.
And what's there's loads of other examples, but a lot of people talk about the way Guillermo Rigondeaux was disrespected by the sport, and he was. I mean, Rigondeaux got the short end of the stick, but so Vladimir Klitschko was also disrespected by a lot of Americans, and it's throughout his career when he was heavyweight king, and I can't blame the Americans for that because Klitschko was insanely boring. But Rigondeaux was boring as well, so it goes both ways. But that's just one of many examples. And you mentioned Bruce Vain. He's another charlatan who.
Yeah.
I mean, he, again, going back to the conspiratard example, he thinks that first of all, he thinks he's a lot smarter than he is.
I agree.
He also believes that if he takes a contrarian view, then he's incredibly intelligent. Like his IQ is above everybody's. Now, if your thinking is that narrow-minded, you are very deluded.
Yeah, I agree.
I've said multiple times on his channel, in his comments, I've said, look, you are blatantly wrong. This is what you're saying. You just don't like Lomachenko. Other examples, I say, look, Usyk's resume is clearly better than Crawford's.
Yeah.
And you're not being real, and he won't reply to me. So, but again, this guy punks out of any debate. So that's why I give you credit for giving as much time to these people. I mean, Dante and Aki, they definitely got views. They like to split people based on.
You said Usyk's resume is better than Crawford's. How's that?
Much better than Crawford's.
On what basis?
Quality of competition. Well, actually, that's enough of an example. Quality of competition is much better.
But you're comparing someone that's two people that are completely different weight classes. How do you compare the resume?
So what does that matter? They're in different weight classes, but in terms of the quality of competition, Usyk's resume is much better.
So Usyk. So what you're saying is, in every Usyk fight, he's won convincingly.
Yes.
I'll tune in
because you do realize he lost to Maurice Bradis.
No, okay.
I'll tune in here real quick. Okay. So I definitely also think Usyk's resume is better than Crawford's. In terms of way better, that's up to the eye of the beholder. So I'll tell you this. Because I've seen the Usyk and Bradis fight. There were certain people that believe that say like Bradis could have won, but it's not like that's not one of those fights to where you take a look at and the world just thinks it's controversial like the first Canelo Golovkin fight. That's a fight to where you have certain people, I would say like about 20%, especially maybe that don't like Usyk, that believe that maybe he could have lost to Bradis. Here's the question about the resume of Crawford and Usyk. When we take a look at one of the more elite opponents that Crawford has fought, say in Victor Postol, I would probably claim that, just in my view, that Maurice Bradis and guys like Glowacki, they're about on the same level as Postol, if not slightly above him. Now, Postol was a very decent fighter, got that one win over Matisse. Other than that, pretty much didn't accomplish anything else in his career. Bradis was a very decent fighter. I believe beat a couple of other decent fighters at that weight class as well. And Usyk, I thought, just won the fight about 7-5. That was also Usyk a bit earlier in his career. Now, you mentioned the dominance. What I will claim is this. Usyk, perhaps at least at times, has not been as dominant as Crawford. Let's also keep in mind that Usyk has had a significant amount of less pro fights, which I think is a partial factor. On top of that, Usyk, if he was just a cruiserweight champion, I would have to claim that Crawford maybe would be over him, but he's not. Let's also keep in mind that Fury at one point in time was top 10 pound for pound around the time Usyk had fought him, and Fury was a decent amount bigger than Usyk. Now, people have mentioned that it can be, when you're that heavy, it can slow you down, and it can. But Fury is someone that is decently athletic for his size. He's also someone that is incredibly intelligent for his size, and he was never supposed to lose to anybody there. And then you have this guy that's a cruiserweight in Oleksandr Usyk that doesn't just beat AJ and DDD and Danny Dubois. He beats Tyson Fury. So he's beating 3 A-grade level heavyweights that are 20 to 30 pounds bigger than him. And, of course, Fury was about 60 pounds bigger in the rematch. But I actually think that went against him. So the thing is this. I don't think, just in my view, I don't think Crawford, and this includes the Errol Spence win, I don't think that Crawford has a win in his career as good as Fury's, or as good as the Fury win. Errol Spence, I think, was a great fighter. Both Fury and Spence are both getting acclaim at one point in time as top 5 pound for pound on certain lists. And on top of that, Fury was a decent amount bigger. I also think he can do more in his boxing game at his best than what a Spence can. Now that's up for debate. But that's why I would claim that Usyk, when you talk about the amount of A-grade level names that he has, I would include Glowacki, I would include Bradis, I would include Murat Gassiev, who was a very decent amateur pedigree, I believe, and trained by Abel Sanchez. I would also give him Danny Dubois. I would give him Tyson Fury. I would give him AJ Anthony Joshua. And I would also give him Michael Hunter. Now, he was never a champion, but keep in mind he did knock out Martin McCauley. And he also, I believe, did have a draw with Alexander Povetkin when he was really naturally a cruiserweight. So here's the thing that I'm going to tell you immediately. The biggest win in Usyk's career, I think, is bigger than the win in Crawford's career. Now, some people would debate that, but that would be my personal argument. Another thing that I also would debate is that, in my view, you can debate that Usyk has about 7 or 8 A-grade level wins. I don't think Crawford has anything above 5 A-grade level wins in his career. Like I said, I give him Adrimov, I give him Spence, I give him Porter, I give him Postol, and I also give him Gamboa. I don't think there's any fighters outside of those 5 that you can really claim is for sure A-grade. But that would be my main argument for Usyk. And then on top of that, Usyk with way less professional fights, and on top of that, being at a weight class he clearly doesn't belong at, he was probably just as dominant over Tyson Fury right now, if not even a bit more than what Crawford was in his last fight against Madrimov, which is also why, in my view, Usyk would be over him on the pound-for-pound list. But like I said, it depends on everything, but that would be my arguments for Usyk.
Yeah, you mentioned Tyson Fury a lot, but, unfortunately, if you do the research, Tyson Fury is overrated. He picks and chooses his opponents. Also, his best win, Tyson Fury's best win in his entire career is basically the same person, fought the same person 3 times. Outside of that, Tyson Fury, he beat Vladimir Klitschko. So his best wins is 2 people, over the hill Vladimir Klitschko and the finished on Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder was finished in the first fight. And the third fight is finished. First fight, fair enough. That arguably, Tyson Fury won. Then he won the second fight. And then Deontay Wilder was done in the first fight. So that's 2 wins. So, and then Tyson Fury should also, by the way, he lost to a guy called John McDermott. It's been proven he should have at least 2 losses on his record. So the thing is, when you mention Tyson Fury, and I agree that Usyk's resume is better than Terence Crawford's, but Tyson Fury is one of the most overrated heavyweight champions in history. I mean, Tyson Fury is not as good as people make him out to
You
be.
know what? I actually agree with you.
Yeah, so
Um,
if you mention Tyson Fury, you can't really use that. But even still, um, Usyk's resume is better, but Tyson Fury is not a great heavyweight. I mean, that guy avoided Usyk for almost 3 years. He tried to
well,
flush him out. He also hasn't fought anyone outside of basically Vladimir Klitschko and Wilder, and he stepped up and fought Usyk because Tyson Fury is someone that doesn't like to fight who people want him to fight. He's basically like a Floyd Mayweather. He wants to fight who he wants to fight. And he also got popped for drugs. I mean, and I have some inside information on that. And then he lied and tried to say it was tainted meat. So Tyson Fury pretty much was always done like 5 years ago. It's only when he stepped up and fought someone who was consistent in Usyk, he lost. So Tyson Fury is not a good win. And also, AJ is a good win. The Bar is a good win. Because I think the Bar beats Tyson Fury. So, but I also think Usyk loses to Agit Kabayel, and I don't think Usyk will ever face Agit Kabayel.
Well,
Also,
can
think
I?
he loses to Joseph Parker, but that's just my opinion. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I may have work coming up soon, so I may not be able to be around for much longer.
yeah,
But
no problem.
yeah, talking. I mean, okay. If I don't compare dominance. Dominance is not the first thing I look at because to me, quality of competition matters more.
Yep.
So if somebody's fighting B level competition instead of A level, of course they're going to look more dominant, more than likely. So, so in terms of Usyk having closer decisions because of Bradis because of the Bradis fight, I mean Spencer. I mean Spence for me is very, very similar, and I know there's Americans who will hate me for this, but Spence to me is very similar to Tyson Fury in the sense that very, very good, but how much of an all-time great. So, when it comes to quality of competition, I don't think there's much difference there. And the thing that sets it apart is that Usyk is tiny compared to Fury, so that therefore makes it a bigger win. And I'm not saying you have to you have to move up like 10 weight classes, or I'm not saying people have to do what Manny Pacquiao did, but if you are fighting somebody who dwarfs you in size, then that does have to count a lot more. And in terms of quality, again, going back to quality of competition, I think Maris Breedis is very similar to Sean Porter.
Yeah.
Yeah, like multiple time world champion, won the belt, lost it, won it again, always gave people a tough fight. I think Murat Gassiev is very similar to Spence. Good, strong fighter, good body puncher, aggressive, and people just don't know Gassiev because he never fought outside of Europe. So, and that's just at cruiserweight. You go to heavyweight again. Joshua and Fury, they're not as technically good as, or Joshua is not as technically good as some of the guys Crawford's fought, like Spence and etc. But he's a much bigger knockout threat. So
Yeah.
that's yeah.
The only,
And
the only re-
the last thing I'll say, I agree with you 100%. Fury is incredibly overrated. I'm waiting for him to retire before I break down on my channel how overrated he is. But that's not Usyk's fault. Like, you can only fight who is champion at the time.
yeah, like Usyk for me, I wouldn't say Usyk is I would not say Usyk is pound for pound number one because I don't think right now there is anyone that's pound for pound number one. I think it depends on if Crawford beats Canelo, because if Crawford beats Canelo, I don't think Terence Crawford has an amazing resume. I think his resume is lacking, but what he will have achieved if he does beat Canelo as a free weight undisputed champion, and he'll be the first person in history to do that. But outside of that, I don't see anyone as pound for pound number one. But the only thing that holds me back from putting Usyk as pound for pound number one is that I haven't seen him fight other heavyweights, and I also have not. When I look at that Maris Breedis fight, For me personally, and I watched that fight many times, and I was very neutral. For me, he lost that fight. And if you look at that fight and you look at the punch stats, you can see as corroborated, Maurice Brader's landed more shots. And if you actually do watch the fight with the sound off, there is just no way in hell I could give that to Usyk. I mean, Usyk is one of my favorite fighters, but I cannot give that fight to Usyk. He lost that fight, but they gave him that fight, and it was a majority decision, which is a bit strange. But outside of that, I'd say Usyk, at the bare minimum, is tied with someone else. But I think pound for pound really depends on Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford. To be fair,
I'll
Well,
comment on that really quickly. So for the Canelo Crawford fight, I don't. If Crawford ends up beating Canelo, I think he can definitely become number one because if Canelo wins, I mean, it'll be a great win. Might up him a spot or two, but obviously Crawford's coming up a couple weight classes. Your point about the Tyson Fury thing, I can understand where you're coming from, but I actually do think that that's not only a good win, I think that that's a great win in Usyk's career, and I'll explain why. Now, of course, right before then, he did have a split decision against Francis Ngannou, so obviously not the best of looks. But like I stated, Tyson Fury has always been a fighter that fights to the level of his competition. There are just certain fighters that are like that. We've seen it before. We've even seen Terrence Bud Crawford do this, where he was very dominant against Errol Spence, but he wasn't quite as dominant against, Madrimov or Aegis Velasquez or that of what was his name, Sean Porter. So when we talk about the Tyson Fury victory, the reason why I have that as an A+ win is because Fury has beaten 3 fighters in the heavyweight division and dominantly that were looked at as great heavyweights. He defeated, first of all, Vladimir Klitschko. Now, Klitschko was a bit older. I believe that he was about 39 years old. Keep in mind, though, that he still had all the belts in that weight class other than the WBC belt, I believe. And Fury didn't just beat him. He very clearly beat him probably about 9 rounds to 3 or 10 rounds to 2. So this wasn't just a victory to where Tyson Fury barely scraped by. This is a victory to where Klitschko, who still was looked at as top 3 pound for pound on everybody's list, although clearly a bit older, Fury embarrassed him. So that's what ended up happening there. He comes back in the first fight against Deontay Wilder, really not adjusted to top level competition. Now, there's of course always a debate about how good was Wilder really. I don't think Wilder was ever an elite level skilled performer, but I do think that maybe at his best you could debate that he was top 20 pound for pound. You're talking about a fighter that, in my view, was kind of the George Foreman of his era, not in accomplishments, not in terms of skill or greatness, but in terms of that brawling type of style of fighter that is just so athletically gifted that even with his deficiencies, he can get you possibly with a good punch. Wilder's kind of that guy. He also was able to beat Luis Ortiz. So this thing that he brought up that Deontay Wilder was done in the first fight, I don't know exactly what he's talking about there. I don't think Wilder was really showing any signs of damage until probably the third Tyson Fury fight after that rematch. So Wilder, I think, was in peak form for the rematch. It's just Tyson Fury was just a more skilled fighter in every single way. And Wilder was very dangerous. He was undefeated. He was someone that I think was, I don't know if he was favored in the rematch, but it was something that was looked at as very close. So the point being is that Fury, although he definitely has not had a spotless career, and the John McDermott fight, of course, did happen. In the rematch, he dominated John McDermott and stopped him, I believe. And that also was within like the first 10 or 15 fights in Fury's career. I don't compare someone's first 10 or 15 fights the same way that I do in the peak level. Canelo Alvarez, or even if we want to talk about Manny Pacquiao, for example, Pacquiao ended up suffering a couple of knockouts to some unknown Vietnamese or Filipino guys in like the first 20 fights in his career. So I'm not going to compare Manny Pacquiao at that time to when he was knocking out guys like Cotto or Ricky Anderson, guys like that. It wouldn't make any sense to do. So that's the first thing. Second of all, once again, he beat Wilder when he was undefeated, dominated him when he was looked at as one of the more elite level fighters of that weight class, and also was coming off the wins over Luis Ortiz. He also then dominated and knocked out Dillian White within 6 rounds. Now, Dillian White is not someone that's unstoppable. He's not someone that, is, flawless in every category. But let's not underestimate Dillian White here. Dillian White is someone overall that, he did end up defeating Joseph Parker. He also ended up defeating Alexander Povetkin. He also ended up defeating Oscar Rivas. He also ended up defeating a couple of other very decent opponents. He knocked out Derek Chisora. So this narrative of saying that Fury is not a good win, I can't agree. Not only do I think it's a good win, I think it's a great win. Now, if you want to debate that Fury is overrated, if you want to debate that Fury maybe isn't as skilled as what some people say, you can debate that. But to claim that Fury, in my view, just isn't skilled or isn't a great win, I can't necessarily agree with that. When every time Fury was in a big fight when he really needed to show up, other than Usyk, he not only showed up, but he ended up beating some of those guys. And Fury, Wilder, and Klitschko wouldn't just be classified as heavyweights; they'd also be classified as super heavyweights. Usyk, if there was a super heavyweight division, he would really be 2 weight classes lighter than that of a Tyson Fury. The only way that Crawford would even be able to be on that level or compare it to a Fury win would be to beat Canelo. Now, is Canelo probably more skilled for his weight class? Probably. At least he used to be. But Fury, I still think, was a phenomenal win for that weight class. He's also someone that can fight in any range. He's great on the inside. He's great on the outside, mid-range. It's just phenomenal what Usyk was able to do against Fury because it wasn't supposed to happen that way. So I have to disagree there. I understand some of his points, but I think the Fury win was an A+ level win, just in my view. But yeah, that's my view on it.
Yeah, I mean, just to respond to a couple of points you made. You're talking about the John McDermott fight. I do agree. Of course, Fury clearly lost that fight.
Yeah,
but Ali almost got knocked out by Henry Cooper, a guy half his
exactly.
size.
Yeah,
So again, we could play this. I mean, I get what you're saying, bro. And this GOAT discussion is always very, very complex. But you can, if you hold the same standards to other fighters, you'll find holes in their arguments. I mean, there are people I started following the sport like really, really closely back in 2013. I remember one of the first posts I saw, which was I thought it was just ridiculous, which is why it sticks out to me.
yeah.
Somebody giving all these reasons that Lennox Lewis had no good wins in his career. They said coked up Oscar Oliver McCall in the rematch,
Oh yeah,
old Tyson, old Holyfield. He got robbed against Ray Mercer. So no, he robbed Ray Mercer. And you mentioned Fury being overrated. I agree, but if we're going to talk about Fury ducking Oleksandr Usyk, which he did, and trying to age him out, well, nobody has pulled off a more blatant duck. Or actually, Fury might be the biggest ducker of all time. I agree, he's very similar to Floyd, but nobody has pulled off a more blatant duck than Canelo ducking David Benavidez. And Canelo didn't look good in his last fight. And that's the Canelo Crawford's going to fight. So, but then again, I'm not saying this means Crawford deserves no credit for beating Canelo, but it's an old Canelo. So and also, Realist, you and I were talking about this yesterday on your show. Crawford hasn't had to earn his spot in that division. He's just moving up and fighting the best guy. So, which is commendable, but he's also not risking his position before he gets there. So, yeah, these discussions are always very complex. I put Usyk above everybody else because of, again, quality of wins. I respect your decision that you think that Usyk clearly lost to Bradis. I don't think that. I think it was a draw, but I don't. It was a fight that I felt Usyk slightly edged, or it was a draw. But like this isn't. What was it? Chavez Senior against Pernell. So therefore, I don't put any stock really into close fights. Like, you have close fights. Like, this is one of the arguments Mike Tyson fans use to say he's top 5 all-time great because he knocked everybody out. Well, but the quality of competition, it is what it is.
Exactly.
So,
So I'll state this because this will be like the next point that I'll take it. Now the guy, of course, I'll bring up 2 points here because he stated that Usyk isn't fighting Aji Kabio or he isn't fighting this guy. I mean, if Usyk if he does end up losing to those guys, right now it's hypothetical because we don't know. But the thing is that I can't criticize Usyk for not fighting Aji Capio when Daniel Dubois right now is the one with the belt, and he could become, 3-time undisputed. So I'm not going to criticize him for that. And also keep in mind, all the heavyweights that he recently beat within his last 3 fights, they've all been champions. As good as what Aji Cabiel is and some of these other guys are, like I know another one of the guys that is getting mentioned a lot right now was Moses Itama, or whatever his name is. Those guys aren't champions right now. So and now the one fighter that I would love to see Usyk fight that I think he does need to fight right now that isn't a champion is Joseph Parker, because he's proved recently that he's basically the number 1 contender. Beat Wilder, beat Zhang in a close fight, and then recently knocked out Martin Bakole, although Martin Bakole very obviously wasn't probably in his shape, but I mean, that seems to be a problem with him. Anyways, the next point I'm going to bring up is this, because the reason why I put these 5 fighters here is because, of course, they're all looked at as heavyweight greats or debatably the greatest of all time. So the conversation I also have is this, because, like I said, what people's points will be is that, oh, Usyk will get knocked out against Tyson. He can't even compete against Tyson or Holyfield. Well, let's take a deeper look at that. So I've already mentioned earlier about Tyson. The question would be is who would possibly win between Usyk and Tyson, or could Usyk potentially beat these guys? And when I take a look at Usyk, even on the screen against all these guys, I think Usyk has a chance to beat everyone on here. Not even just Tyson or Holyfield. I think he also has a chance against Ali and against Lewis. Tyson, once again, this narrative of him, he's never really beaten great A-grade level competition other than maybe Spinks. And that's really about it. When we take a look at Tyson's career, he got overwhelmed against guys who were really great boxers. And someone overall that was stopped against Evander Holyfield in the first fight. So to just say this thing about how Usyk wouldn't have a chance, I don't know how that really holds up. And honestly, I think Usyk is more skilled than Holyfield. To state overall that he can't beat Holyfield, I don't think that holds up either. Holyfield ended up losing to fighters that were probably more similar in size to Usyk that I probably would count as lesser skilled than Usyk. Also, when you talk about Ali, in my view, is the greatest heavyweight of all time. But he's someone, once again, that doesn't have, it's not like he's undefeated. He did end up losing a couple fights in his career. He lost to Joe Frazier, Lennox Lewis, once again. I can't claim anything about a robbery in any fights, but once again, I know he got knocked out by Oliver McCall, and Oliver McCall is not someone that I would classify as an all-time great. He also got knocked out by Hassan Rahman, had a very tough fight with Vitaly Klitschko. So, once again, I wanted to address that because what the narrative always is about these older fighters is that they're way greater than the fighters of the day. And when we really take a look at that, especially when so many people have a narrative of, oh, Usyk may have lost to Bradis, or he beat this guy when this happened or that happened, every fighter within the history of boxing has some sort of a story like that. Lennox Lewis was bigger than Evander Holyfield and also Mike Tyson, but it's not like it's not like we would want to take away credit for that. It's still a great win. Ali, in some of his fights against Ken Norton, you have people out there that believe that Ali lost every single fight to Ken Norton, but yet he's still in the conversation as the greatest heavyweight of all time. So my point being is that when we take a look at this, not only do we have to keep consistent standards, but we have to take a look if that narrative of this guy in history is way greater than this guy, does it really hold up? And I understand that Usyk only has 20-something fights, but within his 20-something fights, he probably has just as many big wins in his career, if not more, than some of these other guys pictured here, especially a Tyson or a Holyfield, debatably even a Lewis, because this narrative of every fight that they ever fought was just against these young killers, that's not the case. Sometimes they're fighting guys that are 24-7, especially back in Ali's time. Sometimes, Lewis is fighting guys that already have been stopped before, already had losses. The thing about Usyk, especially what makes him so special, is that when he fought Bradis and Glowacki and some of these other guys and Michael Hunter, these guys were all undefeated. And he did this within a very short time. Also, keep in mind, Murat Gassiev was undefeated at the time. When you talk about the heavyweight division, Fury was undefeated. Daniel Dubois had already suffered 2 losses, but after that, he went on a humongous 3-fight win streak. So Dubois really has reached the peak of his career. And AJ, I believe, only had 1 loss by the time that Usyk had fought him. So this narrative so a lot of this narrative that a lot of the guys that he fought were like quote unquote washed up, it just doesn't hold up to me. But that's the points that I would bring up.
Yeah, it doesn't hold up. Now, again, I'm saving this for when Usyk retires, but since it's in the discussion, since it's the title of the video, I'll just give you my top 10. It's Ali, Lewis, Holyfield, Holmes, Foreman. This is in no particular order, although I agree Ali is number one. Joe Lewis, Usyk, Jack Dempsey, Mike Tyson, and I believe that's 10.
Yeah.
And I think Usyk. Who would I pick him to beat out of that lot? I mean, it's hard to compare him to Jack Dempsey and Joe Lewis because those guys were almost centuries ago. Not quite, but you get what I'm saying. So we'll just put those two aside. I agree. Mike Tyson would be a very difficult fight to pick because Tyson technically is nowhere near on Usyk's level, but where Tyson was very good was, I mean, maybe the most formidable pressure fighter ever.
Yeah.
Now, not all around. Golovkin's a more better pressure fighter all around because Tyson would fade after 3 rounds.
Yep.
But for those 3 rounds, you've literally got to survive against Goliath. So, when I could easily see Usyk surviving and the first 3 rounds, and then just picking Tyson apart to where it becomes a joke. Truly, I could see that happening, but it's just, again, no one's a bigger fan of Usyk than me. But the reason I would favor Tyson is because it was just Usyk was not the same defensive genius that Lomachenko was, because Lomachenko was a far more talented, naturally gifted athlete. Usyk would actually get touched up. Like the man brought up the Bradis fight. I mean, even an old Chisora was able to catch him a bit. And if that was Tyson, just really hard for me to see it going his way. But that's up for debate. Lewis, I think, was just too big and too strong. Lewis was a more formidable front foot pressure fighter and aggressive puncher than Tyson Fury. So that's why I would favor Lewis. But with that being said, if you take a prime Usyk, very interesting.
Yeah.
Lewis never fought anybody who could move like Usyk. I would pick Usyk to beat Holyfield handily, no question. Like Holyfield, tremendous fighter, tremendous heart, but styles make fights. I mean, Holyfield close to his peak was would sometimes get picked apart by guys who couldn't box anything like Usyk. So yeah. I mean, I could break that fight down for a lot longer, but just to keep it short, I would also pick Usyk to beat Larry Holmes, because Holmes, he was a bit old when Spinks got to him, but he wasn't completely washed up. Like, he was still a really good fighter.
Yeah.
And even though I thought Holmes got robbed in the second fight, he couldn't hurt Spinks. And Spinks, again, tremendous fighter, but at heavyweight, he couldn't move anything like Usyk.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and this is going to sound blasphemy, but George Foreman, I don't think, could land a punch on Usyk, because, I mean, did you see Foreman's technique back in the day?
Yeah, no, that's why I always mention that as well, because people, of course, will criticize. And listen, Wilder's not the most talented guy, but that's why I would like whenever they say, well, the win over Wilder isn't that big. It's like, well, Wilder's not the first heavyweight champion that didn't really have great technique. Foreman was another one. He was really pretty much like a big swinging bear. Yeah. Like, he was able to win a lot because he had enough technique, and on top of that, he was just such a phenomenal athlete. But yeah, I agree with that point.
Yeah, and also I'm happy to say this on your show, because this is the kind of thing you say and most people will have a heart attack. I agree, Tyson Fury, very, very overrated in history. But it's one of those things where he is very overrated because of where he and his fanboys put him in the all-time great discussion. But in terms of skill as a fighter, Tyson Fury is tremendously skilled. So now I'll be the first to say, because I've been saying this for literally 10 years since he beat Vladimir Klitschko, I've been saying he doesn't have the resume to back up his talk of where he ranks as the greatest heavyweight, which was so retarded. But in terms of skill, very good fighter. So therefore, kind of an underachiever, somebody who had the talent but didn't have the confidence to fight the best guys. So But that again, if we're being logical, like, or if we're being consistent, look at somebody like Tyson. You mentioned the Holmes and the Spinks fights. I agree, those guys were great, but Holmes was past his best
Yeah.
significantly, and he had like no time to prepare for that fight. It was just Don King giving him a suitcase full of cash and then said, "Oh, by the way, get ready to go in a month."
Yep.
So, and Spinks was a great fighter, but not a. This is going to sound blasphemy, but again, not a great heavyweight, just
Yeah.
because of factors. So therefore, I agree. Usyk, it's hard for me as his biggest fan ever to put him in the top 5 heavyweights, but top 10, you can compare him to Tyson. Also, Larry Holmes, again, great fighter, but he didn't beat a prime all-time great heavyweight.
Yeah.
And yet, I don't think anybody disagrees that he deserves to be a top 10 all-time great heavyweight.
Yeah.
So even though he didn't beat any great fighters. And yeah, so yeah, that's Lewis, Tyson, Ali. Ali, I agree. He is the greatest heavyweight because he beat Hall of Famers
Yeah.
more. That, like, he has more wins over Hall of Famers than some guys have over normal fighters.
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
he fought so many Hall of Famers, it's hard to compare.
That
Now,
is true.
stylistically, I agree he may have lost to some of the guys, but those are all fantasy matchups. Is different for me than who has the better resume.
Yeah.
So, whereas Holyfield, like, my top 5 all-time great heavyweights, very clearly, and this is something I hold very true to, is Ali, Lewis, Holyfield, Joe Louis, and Larry Holmes because of his technical ability.
Gotcha.
But Holmes, again, he didn't have any wins over prime heavyweights.
Yeah.
Prime all-time heavyweights. But Holyfield did. He beat Bo. He beat Tyson. He beat Foreman and Holmes. They were still formidable. So that's better than Usyk's resume. But I think stylistically, Usyk would beat him. So yeah, it's these conversations are always very complex. They can go on forever.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'll state this. I don't know how much longer the stream is going to be, but I'll state this about, because there's been a lot of talks about who would win between Usyk and Tyson. Yeah, your point about the Chisora Usyk fight definitely isn't the worst. It's a little bit hard to compare because Usyk, I think, was still kind of learning the groove of heavyweight there, and obviously he looked better, I think, in the AJ, or at least less hittable in the Dubois and some of those other fights. But those fighters are also bigger and fought in a different style, so maybe Usyk looked a little bit better in terms of maneuverability than what he actually was. But in terms of Usyk and Tyson, if you're asking me, like, first of all, who's the greater between the two, it's no question. For a career, it's Usyk. But for who would have won that fight, I think I would have had to have bet on Usyk, and probably by stoppage. Because when I take a look at the best of both of them, the best of Usyk that I've probably ever seen was against Daniel Dubois. That was one of his better fights. He looked extraordinarily maneuverable, just wasn't getting hit by a whole lot of flush punches, looked phenomenal. When I think about the best version of Tyson ever, it's a little bit tough to compare because, Teddy Atlas actually had a great quote, and he used to train Tyson, of course, a little bit, so he has a little bit of inside information. Now, Teddy Atlas, in my view, sometimes can be a little bit of a hater on certain fighters, so take what you will with a grain of salt. But he had a great quote where he stated that, Tyson has a record of 50-6, but he said in his personal view, in my view, he's 0-6. And I understand what he means, because he says you're not really in an actual fight until that fighter fights back or until there's a push. And I agree.
Oh, sorry to interrupt, man, but I've just had something come up, so I've just got 5 or 10 minutes. But
Sure.
I remember that that quote that you brought up, and yeah, Paul Malignaggi said a similar thing. He said, "Round 1, 2, 3, we're all strong. A real fighter is shown when you have to overcome something."
Yeah, exactly.
So, and every time somebody stood up to Tyson, i.e. Buster Douglas stand up to the bully for the fight of his life, Tyson couldn't overcome guys like Holyfield who stood up to him. So
yeah, exactly.
So yeah, no, I completely agree with what you're saying. Which I mean, this is Atlas is always a very interesting guy because he's almost like a philosopher.
Yeah.
Um, the thing is, Tyson was almost invincible for those first few rounds. But by saying that, who beat him in his prime? Buster Douglas. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
very
exactly.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I would have favored Usyk over him, because when I just take a look at all the factors, Tyson I think would have hit Usyk a few times. But the thing is about Tyson is that if you're predicting him to win a fight over someone like a Usyk, you have to more than likely have Usyk retreat the majority of the time and not throw a whole lot or get knocked down a couple times. And I just don't know if that would have happened. And also, Usyk is naturally probably a bit bigger than Tyson as well. Now, they're probably around the same weight, but Tyson, if you were fighting today, he probably would really be more of a cruiserweight than what he actually would be a heavyweight. A lot of those guys back then, especially like Holyfield and Tyson, they probably were more like, especially in today's standards, probably more cruiserweights. And that's another reason why I would have favored Usyk. He would have had a 4-inch height advantage. He would have had a 6-inch reach advantage. And Tyson was a guy, especially because of his size, he had to really get on the inside in order to be successful. Now, 90% of the time, usually it was pretty easy work. But when he finally fought a fighter that could actually have a consistent jab, move around him quite easily, or consistently, and also pepper that jab and fight it with a good, intelligent game plan. And Usyk is a guy. Let me also claim this: Usyk is not a guy that comes across to me as someone that's just gonna shrivel up if he gets hit with a heavy shot. I
Oh
seen it
no,
against
no, no,
AJ,
of
and
course.
yeah, he broke his jaw. People don't remember this. He had a broken jaw against Tyson Fury actually in the first fight. He somehow, I think he broke it
Um,
in the
he
middle rounds.
actually that didn't happen.
Oh, he didn't have a broken jaw.
No, that was, but I understand you caught a headline, and no, that what happened was Usyk said after the fight, my jaw hurts, and so as a precaution, the doctors wanted to take him to the hospital to get him checked out, but he didn't go to the hospital. He went straight to the press conference. So that
Gotcha.
was the broken jaw thing was made up by Tyson Fury. As
Okay.
stated.
Okay. All right. I'd have to do more research on
But
that.
but
Yeah, no,
but
I wouldn't be shocked at all. All right. But
yeah.
yeah, no, either way. But Usyk is not a guy that just shrivels up and gives up. And listen, Tyson is a guy to where I'm not going to say he gives up, but you can get him to doubt himself, especially. And it's just easier to beat Tyson than what it is Usyk. And combined with
Oh
the
yeah.
size, I don't think Tyson would have beat him. I think Tyson would eventually either got clearly outboxed or stopped. And it's also important to mention this. Every time Tyson was in a real fight, and when I'm talking about a real fight, I'm not talking about a B or C grade level fighter like Jose Rebalta or something like that. I'm talking about a fighter that actually could compete with him in terms of class. Tyson got stopped every single time. He got stopped against Douglas. He got stopped against Holyfield. Probably would have happened in the rematch too had it not been for the ear situation. And then he also got stopped against Lewis. So I mean, Tyson may have been a bad match for him for potentially, but honestly, I think Usyk would have been a worse matchup for him. But yeah, I
Yep,
know.
I agree. Sorry. Yeah.
No, you're all good. Yeah, stating point overall because yeah, I'll probably end the stream here in about 10 minutes as well. When you say you got to go, because yeah, I don't know what else I can really say on this stream. But yeah, man, feel free to say anything.
Yeah, well, it's middle of the morning here, so when work comes up, it just comes up out of nowhere. So,
You're
but
fine.
yeah, appreciate you having me on, man. Really enjoyed the conversation. Love to jump on again. And I guess just one thing I'll say: fantasy matchups, they're always so. I almost try to avoid them because this is why I haven't made videos talking about them, because you can talk about them forever because the fights never happen.
Yeah.
So, um, like one thing, and I've thought about this for a while, but I haven't done a video on it, is that I think Floyd Mayweather would have lost to all of the four kings.
Mm-hmm.
But by saying that, it doesn't mean his resume doesn't compare. I
Yeah.
think
Exactly.
aside from Hagler, they've all clearly got better resumes than him. And also, speaking of guys who had losses, I think Roberto Duran is the greatest of the four kings.
Yeah.
Um, and people, whenever you say that, people say, "Oh, but he lost to all of them, and look what Tommy Hearns did to him." It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, like, okay, you're taking not just a natural lightweight, but a small lightweight. I mean,
Yeah.
Duran
Exactly.
was more of a super featherweight, and a guy who had cruiserweight knockout power. Like, are you kidding me?
Exactly.
just the mere fact that fight happened is a testament to Duran's bravery. But again, this is for another day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Fantasy matchups with Usyk and Tyson, very, very interesting, because you're talking about the ultimate pressure / knockout artist against the ultimate technician. And talking again about how fantasy matchups would have gone, I'm almost not brave enough to pick Usyk over Ali, because God will strike you down if you say that.
Yeah, I know.
But by saying, like, there was all this talk of saying Tyson would beat Ali, I think Ali would have embarrassed Tyson Fury.
Yeah.
But Usyk and Ali, I mean, that might be the greatest what if fight in boxing history, because, I mean, the ultimate heavyweight movers. Like,
Yeah.
sign
No, I know what you mean.
sign me up if that is possible. And Usyk against Frazier, who also was a top 10 heavyweight in my view. I think my instinct is that Usyk would win, but I can't pick against a guy who fought his entire career with one eye. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, which is why I try to stick to the simpler discussion of who has the better resume. So, but again, when it comes to this is the last thing I'll say. When it comes to discussing all-time great fighters, I'm even though I've done a lot of research trying to put in my head a rough top 20 or top 30 greatest fighters of all time, I can't do it. Like, I keep thinking, oh, what about this guy? What about that guy? And so I almost like to just stick to divisions when it comes to comparing fighters. And the only reason I compare guys like Usyk to Bud and Inoue and Canelo is because they're fighting today. But historically, I'm like, I am not even going to waste my I can't compare Usyk to Mayweather. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. But appreciate you having me on, man. If I could just plug my channel for a second, Fight Sport Talk. And if anybody's wondering why I'm not responding on Twitter, I've been locked out of my account for almost 2 months. So I'm trying to get that sorted. Elon's been slacking, boy. But I'll be uploading videos soon, getting back into it. Appreciate you having me on, man, and would love to jump on in the future, and all the best.
Yeah, no problem, man. You too. I'll be probably having that Lomachenko conversation here in a day or two. It all depends on like what I'm doing, but and then you're certainly invited back, because I know you want to have the Lomachenko conversation. But
yeah, I mean, Loma's another one. I know I said last thing. I'll just quickly say the fighters who I'd like to compare Loma to are other fighters who are great, but the question is how great. Guys like Aaron Pryor, guys like Andre Ward or Joe Calzaghe. And I'm not going to compare him to Floyd, because again, the Archie TV guys, they love that. They love to say, Floyd's better than Loma. I'm like, true, he is. But again, as I would say my little Archie, we can compare Floyd's win over Corrales to Loma's win over Gary Russell. We can compare the Marquez win to the. So if you can have a rational discussion about this, it is fun. But in
most
general,
of them can't.
Loma's just such a fascinating guy to talk about. But thanks for having me on, man, and catch you later.
Yeah, no problem. We'll see you, man. All right. Well, that's pretty much it for Fight Sports Talk, I guess. If anyone else wants to kind of jump on and talk, maybe we'll have the stream a little bit longer. I'll post a link down below. If not, then that'll probably be it for the live stream today. But I'll be posting videos very soon. I'm also working on my top 10 most overrated fighters of all time list. I already got a couple of them done, but it takes a very, very long time to do it. Like each part can be like 13 minutes or over, so that's why it's taken a while. But yeah, man, good conversation with Fight Sport Talk. As for Usyk, my answer, all-time great, not even a doubt about it. Now where is he on the all-time great list? I don't know. But he would probably be over Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson. Top 10 overrated, Dempsey. I could see why. I've already stated this. I don't really talk about fighters before the Joe Louis, Rocky Marciano era. And the reason why that is because, first of all, I would need to do more research on them. And second of all, a lot of those guys didn't fight the worldwide scale of fighters. Jack Dempsey, during his time, it was pretty common for a lot of black fighters to not really reach the top oftentimes, or to not be given the shot. So, I mean, it's kind of like baseball back in the 1920s with Babe Ruth and, or the Negro Leagues, as they so called them. They weren't intermixed. So it's kind of hard to look at both of those leagues and claim that, they were at the best of the best in the world, because we don't know. They didn't face each other. So that was, yeah, I understand your point about Dempsey. I actually put Rocky Marciano in my top 10 heavyweights ever, although, of course, he gets a lot of criticism. But yeah. But anyways, if anyone else wants to jump on the stream, feel free. If not, then I'm going to do a few videos within the next few days, probably over UFC and boxing as well. I know that PBC card is going to be coming soon with Hamza Shiraz and Edgar Berlanga, and also Shakur Stevenson versus William Zepeda. So I'm going to probably put on my fight predictions on that very, very soon. Also need to see what's going on with the UFC. I think that I also have a video talking about John Jones. But anyways, if any of y'all have any more questions or any comments, I'll respond to. Type down below. Let me see overall. Let me actually read some of y'all's past comments here. I didn't see them. Usyk would lose an air if he fought Mike Tyson. Yeah, well, a lot of people actually predict that Mike Tyson did that so he would actually escape an ass whooping in the rematch, which I wouldn't be surprised. Holyfield, that being stated, he did use his head a lot of the times like a damn battering ram, but obviously you can't go around biting people's ears. Usyk would frustrate the hell out of Mike. I agree. I think he would. Let's see. The thing is about Usyk when comparing them to these guys is that they wouldn't have fought anyone like him. They just wouldn't have fought that Soviet pro style, the movement and feints. I mean, I would definitely agree with that. It's always hard to compare generations, especially if they're separated by like 20 or 30 years, which Mike and those guys kind of were. So the question would be is that how, if you were somehow able to put them within this generation, how would they perform? But just in terms of a career, Usyk is greater than Holyfield and Tyson, in my view. Greater than Lennox Lewis, not quite sure, but it's a debate. As for Muhammad Ali, I don't think he has as many big names on his record, but I mean, if someone were to debate Usyk as top 20 or top 10 of all time, I mean, I could see it. I understand. This guy says Usyk is the GOAT. I mean, he's definitely up there. This guy says 78 Sports TV is pretty bad as well. Yeah, he's been another part of the LGBC that has been pretty biased. And he doesn't always make the worst points, but yeah, he's not someone that I would claim as objective. This guy says best cruiserweight ever and top 5 heavyweight GOAT. I don't know if he would be top 5 heavyweight for me just because he doesn't have a whole lot of work there, but he's someone that certainly could be. I mean, he's certainly the best cruiserweight ever. I don't even think it's a debate. Let's see. The Klitschko's are more entertaining than Rigo and Haney. Well, Vitaly Klitschko was looked at as more entertaining, I think, than Vladimir. Vladimir ended up getting a lot of criticism for kind of tapping his opponents and then holding. So, yeah. But anyways, this guy talking about Breidis earlier, he says Breidis was not just a decent fighter, but a damn good fighter. In his heyday, he was one of the best fighters in the world, just not well known in the U.S., but that's because he's a cruiserweight. Not just a cruiserweight, but also European. And sometimes those European fighters aren't known. He says, and Breidis won the WBSS tournament the following year. I actually didn't know that. That's pretty phenomenal. Even AJ got better wins than Spence. You could debate that. I'm not sure if I would debate that AJ's a better win than say Spence, but I understand where you're coming from. AJ has quite the resume. You're talking about wins over White and Povetkin and a decent, older Klitschko obviously, but a Klitschko that was competitive and some other ones. Ruiz, blah blah blah. Why is every fighter done and finished? That's the main excuse that people use when they usually want to tear down a resume. But like I said, someone who's washed up and done to me is someone that either A, clearly doesn't look the same at all, or isn't championship level anymore. That's why when I say Crawford fought Broken Khan, he wasn't. Those two fighters were done because they were stopped 2 or 3 times already, and they were not ever close to winning a belt at that point. So yeah. But anyways, Let's see. But that's pretty much about it for today, guys. Thank you so much for commenting. And we'll have more lives and more videos throughout the week, or sometime whenever I'm ready. Thank you all so much for commenting and watching. Thank you all so much. And yeah, there's probably a lot to talk about in these next couple of months, not just UFC. I want to talk a little bit more about Ilya Topuria and John Jones and that situation, but also, of course, we got some upcoming cards, not just the Canelo and Crawford card. We also got Berlanga versus Hamza Shiraz, or Shiraz, however you pronounce it, and Stevenson versus Zepeda. And I think there's some other fights that are about to pop up as well, but I don't remember which ones. Oh shit, I forgot. Usyk versus Dubois is going to be happening. That rematch is going to be happening later on this month. I might even do a live for that. So yeah, we'll see. Let's see. Berlanga and Rolly are undeniable goats. Oh, for sure. Rolly Romero especially. It's actually interesting though. Berlanga, I wouldn't be surprised if he won that fight against Shiraz at all. But I got to do my prediction on that. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching. Peace out for now. Talk to you all later. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you.